In this video, we're going to talk about something almost every one of us has faced: how to communicate with people who simply don't like you. It could be a neighbor who always has a sour look, a family member who dismisses your words, or even someone in your community group who seems determined to criticize you. And let's be honest, at this stage of life, none of us want to waste our time and energy on negativity. We want peace, respect, and meaningful connections. You can't control whether someone likes you, but you can control how you respond to them. And the way you respond can protect your peace of mind and even open the door to healthier interactions. In this video, I'll walk you through practical steps, simple, real-life strategies, that will help you deal with difficult people gracefully, without losing your calm or your dignity. Before we get started, I'd love to hear from you. When was the last time you had an uncomfortable encounter with someone who didn't seem to like you? Share your story in the comments below. You might be surprised how many of us have been in the same situation, and your words could help someone else feel less alone. Point 1. Understanding why they don't like you. My friends, the very first step in handling someone who doesn't seem to like you is to stop and ask yourself why. Not in the sense of blaming yourself or trying to figure out what's wrong with you, but in a deeper way, looking at the bigger picture. Often, when a person treats you coldly or with criticism, it has very little to do with who you are. Many times, it has everything to do with their own feelings, their past experiences, or even struggles you can't see. Think about it. Maybe that person is dealing with their own insecurities. Maybe they grew up in an environment where criticism was the only way they knew how to communicate. Or perhaps they are carrying stress, health worries, financial struggles, or family problems, that spills over into how they treat others. When you take a step back and see that their behavior is more about them than about you, it becomes easier not to take things so personally. Let me give you an example that may sound familiar. A woman in her 70s once shared that in her local book club, there was one member who seemed to dismiss everything she said. At first, she felt anxious before every meeting, wondering what she had done wrong. But over time, she noticed something important: this person wasn't just unkind to her, she was unkind to everyone. The criticism was her pattern, not a reflection of anyone else's worth. Once this senior realized that, she stopped carrying the burden of blame. She was able to show up, enjoy the discussions, and let that negativity slide off her shoulders. That's the gift of understanding. When you stop making their dislike about you, you free yourself from self-doubt. You begin to look at the situation with curiosity instead of defensiveness. And curiosity leads to peace. Ask yourself, is this really about me, or is this person struggling with something of their own? More often than not, the answer will remind you that you are not the problem. Point 2. Staying calm and neutral. Now that we've talked about understanding where someone's dislike might come from, the next step is learning how to stay calm and neutral when you're face to face with them. My friends, I know this is easier said than done. When someone raises their voice, criticizes you unfairly, or gives you that dismissive look, the natural reaction is to feel defensive. You might want to snap back, explain yourself, or walk away in frustration. But here's the truth: meeting negativity with more negativity only makes the fire burn hotter. Staying calm is not about letting the other person win. It's about protecting your own peace. Think of it like this: your calmness is your shield. It stops their words from cutting into you and keeps the situation from spiraling out of control. One of the most effective ways to do this is through your tone of voice. Speak slowly, gently, and with a steady rhythm, no matter how the other person sounds. A calm tone often surprises people who expect an argument, and it can soften their hostility without you saying anything more. Your body language matters too. Uncross your arms, keep your shoulders relaxed, and make light eye contact. These small signals say, "I'm not here to fight," and many times the other person will unconsciously lower their own defenses. And here's a simple but powerful trick: pause before you respond. Even just a few seconds of silence gives you time to breathe, gather your thoughts, and choose your words carefully. That pause can prevent an emotional outburst you might later regret. Let me share a story. A retired nurse once told me about her neighbor who always criticized her garden. At first, she snapped back, and their disagreements quickly grew heated. But when she tried a new approach, simply saying, "I hear your perspective," in a calm tone while keeping her posture relaxed, something shifted. The neighbor had less energy to argue, and over time the conversations became less tense. So remember this: calmness is not weakness. It's strength. Point 3. Using empathy to bridge the gap. My friends, let's move to the next step: empathy. Now, when I say empathy, I don't mean you have to agree with someone who's treating you poorly, or excuse their bad behavior. Empathy simply means trying to understand what the other person might be feeling, even if you don't like the way they're acting. When people feel understood, even just a little, their walls begin to come down. Think of it like this: someone's dislike is often not about you. Many times, it's about their own frustrations, fears, or insecurities. Maybe they are lonely and don't know how to express it. Maybe they feel unappreciated in their own life, so they criticize others to feel a little stronger. Or maybe they're under pressure, financial struggles, health worries, or family drama, that spills into how they treat you. When you remind yourself of this, it becomes easier to respond with compassion rather than defensiveness. For example, a retired teacher I once worked with felt constantly criticized by a former colleague. Every interaction left him drained and frustrated. But one day, he stopped and asked himself, why might this person act this way? He realized the colleague was dealing with immense pressure from their boss and was simply projecting stress onto others. With that new perspective, he approached conversations differently. Instead of snapping back, he said things like, "I can see this is a tough time for you." Just those simple words changed the tone. The colleague became less combative, and while they didn't become best friends, the tension eased enough to make communication manageable. So the next time someone seems cold or unfriendly, pause and ask yourself, what might they be going through? You may not know the full story, but even asking the question helps you keep your heart soft and your mind clear. Empathy is the bridge that can turn a tense interaction into a respectful one, or at the very least, it helps you keep your own peace. Point 4. Setting boundaries without being rude. Now, my friends, let's talk about something that many seniors struggle with: setting boundaries. We often feel like keeping the peace means saying yes, staying quiet, or letting things slide, even when it hurts us inside. But here's the truth: without boundaries, you end up carrying stress, resentment, and even guilt that doesn't belong to you. Boundaries are not walls to push people away, they are lines that protect your well-being, your dignity, and your peace of mind. The good news is you can set boundaries firmly without being rude. It's all about the words you choose and the calmness in your delivery. Instead of snapping or arguing, try phrases like, "I'd like to move on from this topic," or "I respect your opinion, but I'd prefer not to continue this conversation." Short, polite, and firm. These statements don't attack the other person, but they clearly signal your limits. One of my clients, a woman in her late 60s, struggled with her daughter-in-law, who was constantly critical of her choices. For years, she tried to keep quiet, hoping things would improve, but it only made her feel small and stressed. Eventually, she began calmly setting boundaries. Whenever the conversation turned negative, she would gently say, "I'd like to change the subject," or excuse herself from the room. Over time, the daughter-in-law realized those criticisms weren't going to get a reaction anymore, and the tension began to ease. My client kept her relationship with her family, but also protected her own mental health. Here's the important part: you don't need to wait until you're overwhelmed to set boundaries. Think ahead, know what you will and won't tolerate. Maybe it's constant criticism, gossip, or raised voices. When you've decided your limits ahead of time, it becomes easier to respond without hesitation. And remember, setting boundaries doesn't mean you're selfish. It means you respect yourself enough to say, "This is not okay for me." People may not like it at first, but often they learn to respect you more because of it. Point 5. focusing on common ground. My friends, even when someone clearly doesn't like you, there is almost always one small thing you both share. It could be a value, a goal, or even a simple interest. Finding that common ground is one of the best ways to shift a difficult relationship from tension toward cooperation. It doesn't mean you have to suddenly become close friends, it simply means you redirect the energy from conflict to connection. Instead of asking yourself, why don't they like me, try asking, what do we both care about? Maybe you both want your neighborhood to feel safe. Maybe you both enjoy gardening, local sports, or family traditions. It could even be something as simple as wanting peace during a community event. By focusing on what unites you, you remind the other person, and yourself, that you're not standing on opposite sides of everything. Let me share an example. A senior I once worked with, Joan, had a neighbor who seemed dismissive of everything she said. At first, Joan dreaded running into her and avoided conversations. But then she realized they both cared deeply about keeping the neighborhood safe and welcoming. So instead of arguing over small disagreements, Joan began conversations about safety measures, community events, and shared improvements. Slowly, the tone shifted. The neighbor, who once rolled her eyes, started asking Joan for her opinion on projects. Did they become best friends? No. But the tension melted into something more cooperative. Language plays a big role here. Instead of saying, we disagree about this, try saying, I think we both want the best outcome. Let's see how we can work toward that together. Those words take the edge off conflict and turn it into teamwork. So next time you face someone who doesn't seem to like you, ask yourself, where's the overlap? You may find that one shared thread is enough to weave a calmer, kinder interaction. Point 6. Avoiding gossip and negative talk. My friends, let's be honest, when someone doesn't like us, it can feel tempting to talk about them behind their back. Sharing your frustration with a friend or family member may feel like a relief in the moment. But here's the danger, gossip almost always makes things worse. It spreads negativity, feeds misunderstandings, and sometimes even gets back to the very person you were talking about, creating even more tension. For seniors, who value peace and dignity, avoiding gossip is one of the most powerful choices you can make. Instead of venting in a negative way, shift how you speak about the person. Stick to facts, not judgments. For example, instead of saying, she's impossible to deal with, you might say, she handles things differently than I would. Notice how that second version feels lighter? It keeps your heart calmer, and it doesn't fuel bitterness. Words have weight, and when you choose lighter ones, you carry less emotional burden. I remember a retired librarian who once told me about a coworker that always criticized her. At first, she would complain about him to mutual friends, hoping to feel understood. But word traveled, and eventually, the tension escalated instead of easing. When she made the decision to stop gossiping and started focusing on neutral, respectful language, something surprising happened, her own stress dropped. She no longer carried the same heaviness because she wasn't repeating negativity over and over again. Another helpful tool is reframing. Instead of thinking, they are so difficult, try saying to yourself, this is an opportunity for me to practice patience and self-control. It may sound simple, but that small shift in perspective makes you feel stronger instead of drained. And remember this, gossip doesn't just affect the relationship with that one person. It affects your reputation too. So, the next time you feel the urge to vent, pause. Take a breath. Either keep it to yourself, write it in a private journal, or reframe it in a healthier way. Avoiding gossip is like choosing fresh air over smoke, it clears your space, lightens your heart, and keeps your dignity intact. Point 7. Knowing when to walk away. My friends, this next point may be the hardest to accept, but it's also one of the most freeing. Sometimes, no matter how calm you are, no matter how kind or empathetic you try to be, some people will not change. They thrive on conflict, they enjoy stirring negativity, or they simply don't have the capacity to meet you halfway. In these situations, the wisest choice you can make is to walk away. Now, let me be clear, walking away is not weakness. It's wisdom. It's the understanding that your energy, your peace, and your well-being are too valuable to waste on people who refuse to treat you with respect. Especially as we get older, we have to protect the limited time and emotional energy we have. You deserve to spend your days with people who bring you joy, not constant stress. Take Richard, a retired engineer, as an example. He had a neighbor who challenged him at every single community meeting, arguing, raising his voice, dismissing Richard's opinions. At first, Richard tried to stay polite, set boundaries, and even find common ground, but nothing worked. Finally, he decided to limit his interactions. He still attended necessary meetings, but he kept his comments brief and professional. Outside of meetings, he chose not to engage. The result? His stress level dropped, he slept better, and he had more energy to spend with friends and family who actually cared about him. Here are a few gentle ways to walk away gracefully. Excuse yourself politely, say, "I think we should continue this another time," and step out of the conversation. Limit exposure. If someone constantly drains you, reduce the amount of time you spend around them. Redirect your focus, pour your energy into relationships and activities that lift your spirit, not those that tear it down. Point 8. Practice makes perfect. My friends, let's finish with a simple but powerful truth: communicating with people who don't like you is a skill. And like any skill, it gets easier the more you practice it. The first time you try to stay calm, set a boundary, or respond with empathy, it might feel awkward. You may even stumble or walk away thinking, "I could have handled that better." But that's okay. Every attempt builds strength, and over time, you'll notice real progress. Think about how many skills you've learned throughout your life, whether it was cooking a new recipe, fixing something around the house, or even adjusting to new technology. None of those things came perfectly on the first try, right? Communication is the same. The more you practice, the more natural it becomes. One helpful tip is to start small. Practice these strategies in lower stress situations first. Maybe it's a neighbor who makes small but annoying remarks, or a volunteer at your community center who tends to be fussy. These are good opportunities to try staying calm, using empathy, or gently setting boundaries. With each experience, you'll gain confidence for bigger challenges. Another method is role-playing or rehearsing. You can practice responses out loud when you're alone. For example, you might say to yourself, "I hear your perspective," or "I'd prefer not to discuss this topic." Speaking the words out loud makes it easier to recall them when you actually need them. Some seniors even find it helpful to write down phrases or journal about difficult conversations, so they have a plan in mind before the moment comes. Let me share an encouraging story. A woman named Susan, in her early 70s, had a book club member who often dismissed her ideas. At first, Susan dreaded speaking up. But she decided to practice. She worked on calm responses, empathetic phrases, and polite boundaries. It didn't change overnight, but after a few weeks, she noticed something amazing: the dismissive comments slowed down, and she felt stronger in herself. The practice gave her confidence, and that confidence showed in every interaction. So remember, progress comes step by step. Don't expect perfection. Expect growth. My friends, we've walked through 8 important steps together: understanding why someone may not like you, staying calm, practicing empathy, setting boundaries, finding common ground, avoiding gossip, knowing when to walk away, and reminding yourself that practice makes perfect. Each of these steps is simple, but when you put them together, they create a powerful toolkit for handling difficult people with grace and dignity. So, as you move forward, I encourage you to try one small step this week. Maybe it's pausing before you respond. Maybe it's setting a polite boundary. Or maybe it's simply choosing not to gossip. Whatever it is, notice how it makes you feel. Every little change brings more confidence, more peace, and more freedom. And before we close, I'd love to hear from you. Which of these 8 steps do you feel will help you the most in your own life? Share it in the comments below. Your insight could encourage someone else who's facing the same struggle. Remember, my friends, you deserve respect, peace, and joy in your relationships. And with these tools, you'll be better prepared to handle even the trickiest conversations with wisdom and grace.